Welcome to Standing in the Gray podcast, where we throw out questions and chat about why we aren't meant to be lukewarm Christians. I'm your host, Chantel Brewer. This first season, I'm mulling things over with my friend Jacob Banuelos, and our theme this season is being in the world, not of it. Let's cozy up to the coffee table and ask today's question. Thanks for being here, Jacob.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, man.
Me too.
It's our first episode. So today's question is, do I have to go to church? And in a day and age where everybody has digital everything at their fingertips, it's this idea of, I'm watching church. Mm-hmm. You can stream church from another country if you wanted to and feel especially holy. But our question is, do we have to go to church? Is that church? Is that enough? So any thoughts?
Yeah. The first thing I think of is, how connected are you when you're doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You're obviously connected through the internet.
Yeah.
But with people, like the church is people. It's not a computer. So, one of the things that I had thought about was, you don't have to go to church. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And somebody was telling me a story the other day about a friend of theirs who was living in China. And they were going to this church, like an underground church. And it was like a bunch of people. It was like big. And these people are hungry for God. They're going there and they're worshiping, they're praising, and they're like risking their lives to do this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then, we're over here in America and we're like, do I have to go to church?
Do I have to? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
You see the difference, and, we have a privilege, right? So I feel like, I get to go to church.
Yeah.
That's how I feel personally.
Yeah.
But, I think that if you have to ask the question, then, obviously there's something.
Yeah, maybe something in your heart that's not quite. Maybe it's the wrong question that you're asking. Maybe that's not the real question. I was reading in Acts when the church was started. Obviously there's this entire book of the Bible before Acts gets here, but I was reading in Acts where it talks about the very beginning of when the church was formed and the community. And so in Acts 2, it talks about they had what it meant to be living as a Sunday church and what that actually looked like. And then, and then the rest of the days. And I think sometimes to me, the rest of the days are even the more important church. Mm-hmm. And that's even almost like synonymous with community. I view Sunday mornings as my time to come and be with my people so that I can fill up, I can receive from my pastor who I've, even as a ministry leader, I've placed myself under submission, which that's a whole other can of worms. There's a lot of people that just got mad that I said the word submission, but that's biblical. It's modeled even with Jesus through his entire walk on earth. He was submitted to God, and he would go off and he would have that kind of church even on his own between him and God.
Right.
And so what they did in verse 42, it says, all believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. And the word devoted right there
goes beyond Sunday.
It goes beyond Sunday. Yeah. It became part of who they were. And I wrote down the antonyms of the word devoted: neglect, apathetic. I didn't like that word. That was harsh. Unfaithful, uncaring. And look, I think that's crazy, to have, if you think about, okay, well, if I'm not going to church, I'm not devoting myself to those things. You're the opposite.
Right.
And then it's like, man, what am I opening myself up to? So it goes way beyond this question of, do I have to go to church, to all of a sudden it's like, obviously that, to me, that's showing that I have wrong priorities. Or do I have wrong priorities? Maybe that's the next question we need to be asking. Also, why would you ever say no to sharing meals? That's it's right here in Scripture. You're going, right. There's food, I'm there. It's not just the Lord's Supper.
I know.
It actually talks about, it differentiates between them. And it said all of the believers. And then it even goes on to talk about just what they were able to bring to the table. And I think that's the other thing, is we think so often about, well, what am I going to get out of it? Mm-hmm. I can watch this teaching. I can listen to this worship.
How's this going to help me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's just the wrong, if that's why we're going to church, God doesn't need that. so maybe we could just skip it all together. There's plenty of times on a Sunday where my family, we stay home, or like this last Sunday, we were camping. This is our annual camping trip, and we were camping. I didn't do church while we were gone. I spent time with my grandson. I spent time with my husband. I spent time, recording us all playing card games and things like that. Because that's my legacy. Those people are my legacy. That's my community. And I was pouring in, and I was intentional during that time. And so it's not like God needs us to do some form of or formula on us, even on a Sunday morning, and it doesn't even have to be a Sunday morning. There's plenty of people that go to church on a Saturday night or a Wednesday night or whatever their work schedule allows. And, I think it's more, if we could rearrange our thinking so that it's like, what am I bringing into this room? What am I bringing to this table? And then what am I taking with me into the week in order to bless somebody else? I just, to me, that it's a subtle mind shift, but it could really make a huge difference, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. I actually had a thought when you were like in the beginning about, I always like to look at the question and say, why are we asking that question?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so with what you're saying, I think about, honestly, I think it boils down to the church, like in this country, and the way that the church has been leading people for a long time.
Like the church at large.
The universe, like the whole church, not just the Sunday church.
Yeah.
And I feel like the big church in this country has been, pretty much peddled Sunday as like, that's church.
Yeah.
That's church.
Yeah.
Like church is, you go in, you have some coffee, you say hi to some people, you sing some songs, you do a little prayer, you hear some scripture, you have brunch, and then you go on with the rest of your week.
You have to have brunch,
right? That's part of. I mean, I just think about like what this country looks like when people think of people that aren't devoted, right? What I would envision the church to look like in that respect, and that's what it looks like to me.
Well, and in Acts, it actually says that all the people brought everything that they had. It doesn't say that it brought their leftovers. It says they brought everything they had and they gave to the church as needed. So if you came to church on a Sunday or whatever, on a Tuesday, and, say we're gathered at my house and I've got a small group and, we're chatting about whatever, we're chatting about the early church or what spiritual, Christian living looks like during the week. And you were like, dude, I could really use I don't have a dining room table. Yeah. And then someone else is like, oh, I brought my dining room table because, I had it and just in case anyone needed it.
Right.
Like, I think that's crazy. We don't, in America, we really don't tag along our dining room tables, but wherever we go, just looking for someone to give it away to. But maybe that's a bit of a shift that we should be looking at. What are all the things we have? I always think it's so funny when I drive by. You ever drive by people's houses and their garages are open and they have all this extra furniture? And that's probably been out there for like years, right?
They haven't touched it. Yeah.
I want to walk up all the time and be like, can I have that dresser? Like all the time. They have cool stuff out there.
They're going to be like, no, I need that.
I need that. Right. No, they won't. They'd be like, oh my gosh, please take that off my hands.
Yeah.
And I just think, what if that was our mindset?
Yeah.
That'd be a great party. They have progressive dinners. What if we went from garage to garage?
I just got a thing from each thing.
Yeah. And we were just able to take their things. That would be church.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be such a blessing. And, we have all of this technology. We have all of these, I don't know, we have all of these ways to connect to each other. And we're still so disconnected in it all. And I just think that just maybe it could be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
One of the things that was actually super cool. My daughter, she's 20. I have 5 kiddos, and my right in the middle kiddo, she's 21, and she said she was talking about wanting a church. So her and her almost fiance.
Do they have one right now or no?
They do now.
Okay.
But they were looking for one, and she came over, and you were here, and a couple other people from church were here, and it was after you guys had left, and she said, "I want a church." She's like, it was like you guys just had church here. And I don't even know we didn't talk about, I don't think we talked about biblical anything. We just had conversation, and maybe it was for my birthday. I don't know. I don't even think it was an event. You guys were all just over. And we were eating dinner and I don't know, just being. And she's like, I want a church like that, where the people from church actually show up all the other days. And I actually wrote down a list of the things. She said, they showed up to your birthday. They helped move some furniture. I don't even know what kind of wild party we were having. Move some furniture.
We probably moved like one thing.
I know. I don't even know. But this is her. I mean, she's a young adult, right?
Yeah.
And she's seeking Jesus. Her and her fiance want to find a community. They want church together. And they'd been at this church for a while. And she said they still didn't know anybody. They even went to small group every Wednesday night. And she said, no one talks to us. And she's like, so she's looking at this and then looking at what just was happening in our living room.
Right. Just like a regular Tuesday or whatever.
Right. And she said, then another friend was here and they put in a good word for her so that she could get this house up the road. And she said, she's like, they come over and they steal your kids, like in a healthy way, you know, like you
in
come
the legal
over,
way. It's legal.
Right.
The way that we're doing
But you come over and you're in community. So it's essentially like we're doing this whole thing of life together. She said, hangs out because it's Tuesday. It must have been a Tuesday.
Oh, look at that.
We actually stopped. Something had happened and we stopped. We got a message saying somebody was sick or something. And we all stopped and prayed for somebody in our church. And I mean, for me, that's just Tuesday,
Just
right?
regular stuff.
Living life. But she said she was looking for that thing. And I was so proud of our church community. I was so proud that that's what she saw. Because honestly, if it was a different day, she may have seen something else. You know, we don't always do it right. But what a thing for a young adult to be craving. And I started thinking, I know she's not the only one that's looking for that. And it's not her age. Even, I think it's remarkable that she is 21 and that's what she's seeking.
Yeah.
And she's found it now. She has they have found a church where they are in community with people and they go do things together. And she's like, I just want my church family to be, my people. And I love
life.
Yeah. And I just love that she saw that. And it wasn't like, okay, we're having church. And then we're going to stop having church and then we're going to have dinner and then we're going to stop having dinner and then we're going to have whatever. It was just the flow of things.
Right.
And when I was, when we were preparing notes for this, I thought, I love that we are the kind of people that it doesn't have to be perfect. Because I know she probably saw stuff that night that was hectic and whatever, but her takeaway from it was, it wasn't overdone. It wasn't,
it wasn't a production.
Right. Nobody stood up and did a reading.
There was no itinerary.
Right. It was just that living life. And I think every church has an opportunity. If you're not in that community, I encourage you to find a community. They exist. They really do exist. So I encourage you to find that. And then if you're not being that community, be that community, because what it does is, like, I want to go to church on Sundays,
same.
And I remember, before I came to our church now, and I was so, I don't know, I've grown up in church. And so going to church on Sundays is the norm for me.
Right.
And a lot of times it was, well, that's what we're supposed to do. And I remember I remember being so excited that it was Saturday when we started going to Convo. And I was just like, oh man, it's almost Sunday, and I hadn't had that for such a long time. And, our pastor is an awesome preacher. I love it. Our worship's great, it's super anointed. But just like these people asking these questions, do I have to go to church? I can find that anywhere. I can find an anointed preacher. I can find some amazing worship online. But that's not what my spirit was excited for. I was yearning for that community, and I was finding real, authentic people, not just the people who show up to help you move, which is a really big deal. That's a lot of love when people will do that. I usually have a backache right around someone needing me to help them move, but I got tiny muscles. But it's all the other things. It's just like the real life, and it's the hard stuff too. And that kind of leads into my next point of, should we expect the church or a community or anybody to come and help in our hard times where we're needing people? Like, should we expect that they're going to stop what they're doing if we have not sewn into any kind of relationship?
Yeah. You were talking about, so first I want to say, like, the yearning, right, for that church community and the type of community that we have and that your daughter saw. And, I think that it's like, I expect that because, if I think about the fact that God created all of us, right? And so
Yeah.
there's even if we're not actively following him, like there's still a part of us that's connected to him.
Sure.
Even
Yeah.
if we're not like in prayer and the
Yeah.
word and the spirit and all that. So I think it's only normal and natural that like our body, like and our soul is like looking for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because like I know for myself, I can say that, there was a large gap in my life, like maybe 15, 16 years, where I did not go to church. And I'd be in the Bible sometimes. I prayed a lot. And it wasn't until I came to Convo that I found my community.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, my vision of what church was that one that we're
The
talking
formula,
about. Yeah, and like
brunch.
like the order of operations, and like not a lot of room for deviation. And so it was like really. It was like shattered like my whole idea of like what church was, and even though like I knew God pretty well, it was just like this whole like new thing that I didn't even know existed. And I had a situation where early on I signed up for like a group, and like something happened where I missed the communication. I was so upset, because I missed.
Did they not meet or something?
Well, they met somewhere, and they had moved the meeting place.
Oh.
And I guess, like, I don't know if I wasn't on the list. Something happened. I didn't get the memo.
Uh-huh.
I show up to the place, and there's nobody there.
Oh.
And I'm like, see, I tried.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, see what happens,
Yeah.
I was so mad. And then I would still go to church, but I wasn't getting connected. Yeah. And then, I started going through a rough time, and I'm like, nobody cares about me. Like, the church doesn't care about me. And, I go to AA, I'm involved in AA, and I just heard a friend's voice say, well, like, are you talking to anybody?
Yeah.
Do you have anyone's numbers? Like, do you have relationships there? And I'm like, no. So how is somebody going to reach out to me when I'm having a tough time?
How are they even going to know?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're not even know.
Going back, you said earlier, you go to church, you say hi to somebody.
Yeah.
It's, hey, Jacob, how are you doing? Fine.
Good. Fine.
Busy.
Yeah.
Everyone says busy.
Oh, tired.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Right. Well, this was great spending time with you, Jacob.
Have a good one.
I'm sure I'm going to know if something's really going on with you with all of that nonsensical answer that you gave. So it's like, so even actually, I would say when we're in church, is that going to church? Is that being in church? Is that being in community? Is that how it's laid out here in Acts, the way that
how does the Bible call the church?
Right.
I mean, it's funny too, because like, even as we're talking about it, there's things that are popping into my mind, like, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way,
Well, that's why we're having this conversation.
I know.
It's funny. So I told you I have 5 kids, and my oldest son, he's my second born. And, I don't necessarily buy into all of the like birth order, everything. For him, it's
what's that?
So they'll believe. It's like some people will think like firstborns are type A.
Yeah, if you're here, if you're at this spot, then you're that.
Yeah.
If you're in that, I have 5 brothers. Also, and half
Where
sisters.
Are you
so
in the rank?
I am. How do I say this? So there's a younger one, and then there's me.
Oh yeah, second to last.
Second to last.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm second to last. Yeah.
So it's kind of cliche or whatever, or stereotypical that second-borns just kind of let the firstborn do all the stuff. They just
really?
like let him take the lead. And it's funny because his whole life I'd watch him, and he just had this characteristic where he would wait and see if my oldest would get up. And I'd say, guys, come put away the dishes. And, she'd get up right away and she'd come put away the dishes. And he's just like sitting, like maybe he hears like the first rack get pushed in. So he's like, yeah, I could probably go in now, And I'm like,
or they're all done. He's like, you guys need help?
Yeah, right. Oh, sorry. I had to go to the bathroom for all 7 minutes that it took to put away these dishes every single time. And she starts calling him out on it, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Get up. Look how fast she gets up. And he's like, oh, just dragging his feet. And it was funny because so he's 22. And like a year ago, I was laughing because he's the same way. He's a hard worker. He's a fireman. I mean, he is a hard worker.
Yeah.
And then even on his days off, he's doing all this stuff in his house and rebuilding and helping my husband with projects and stuff. And my husband said, hey, grab that. He told him to grab something. And my son just kind of sat for a second and he just like looked at whatever it is he wanted him to grab. And my husband's an only child. And so everything falls on him, in his birth order.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like getting to work and stuff. And my son's just looking at it and I'm watching him and I'm all, are you thinking in your mind, what's the least amount of work I can do so that you are happy with me right now? And he goes, that is exactly what I was thinking. I was like, dude, you have not changed since you were a kid. And I just think that's this question. Do I have to go to church? Is you saying to God, Lord, what is the least amount I can do for your kingdom to get all the blessings and to not really have to put myself out there too much?
If I just show up on Sundays, is that enough?
Is that enough? Yeah, I went, I'm there.
Yeah.
But again, so, you may as well just stay home and watch it online.
At that point.
Yeah, what are you doing? You're kind of dialing it in.
But I also like what you talked about, shifting the mindset of like, what can I get out of this? Into like, what can I offer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has been a theme in my life over the last 6 years that I've never thought that way. It's always been like, how can I do the least amount of work and get the most out of it? What can I, what's the least amount of relationship I can have this person and to get something out of it,
Oh, I like that you say that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I like that you say that because actually this attitude that we have with God, this relationship with God, what we're putting in there, I think he's the most important thing.
Yeah, 100%. And
so everything else is probably going to get even less from us.
Yeah.
And so I like that you point out that that's going to roll into other relationships because that's going to be what becomes our norm. That's the bar we've set. Okay, this is my relationship with God. This is the bar I've set. So, everything else could, without us saying it out loud, it sounds crazy when we say it out loud, but, we start to think, okay, this is just a friendship. Or I think sometimes we think, well, that's not my role. I'm not a leader here.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, do you have to be in ministry to stack chairs?
No.
Or to wipe up, get someone
Dude, all
napkins?
you have to do, like literally, like, and this is just like a groundbreaking thought, but like literally all you have to do is like walk in and say, hey, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
Is there something I can do to help?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, what if our focus was more of how can I outserve who I was last year or last time? And, looking to actually outserve loving God's people. Like I'm looking at how God loves people. How can I'm in competition with him, not with other people.
Yeah, you're never going to get there, but, posing the challenging questions yourself is going to lead you to do more than you think you're capable of. Yeah.
In 1 Corinthians, it talks about the one body, many parts. That's it's almost like the cliche. Not cliche because it's scripture, but it's like the go-to scripture when we're talking about, is everybody in church important? We talk about, so it's 1 Corinthians 12:12, and the human body has many parts, but the many parts make up one whole body, and so it's talking about that we're all the body of Christ. And if you come down here, it says some of the parts that God has appointed for the church are first are apostles, second are prophets, third are teachers, then those who do miracles, those who have the gift of healing, those who can help others, those who have the gift of leadership, and those who speak in unknown languages or speak tongues. It would say in another translation. And it says, are we all apostles? Are we all prophets? Are we all teachers? Do we all have the power to do miracles? Do we all have the gift of healing? Do we have the ability to speak in unknown languages? Do we have the ability to interpret unknown languages? Of course not. I don't have what you have.
Right.
And so if only one of us is showing up each week,
you're missing something.
You are missing an opportunity to use the gifts that God's given you. And if you've never, I would challenge you that if you have never walked in a gift that God has given you, if you've never actually tried to play that out and like actually walk that out, it is the coolest feeling ever. I was 7 years old when God told me I was going to be a teacher. I was literally standing.
Really?
Yeah, I was in my bedroom. I had a little chalkboard, or I had a clipboard in my hand. I had I had a chalkboard of math happening, and I had all of my stuffed animals lined up on my bed. I was doing math with my stuffed animals. I don't even really care for math all that much.
Right.
I'm good at it now, but I didn't care for it. And God was like, "This is where I have you." And because I was 7, I didn't even think to even question him. I literally remember thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense. This, so,
Yeah.
and I knew he was talking about being a teacher. And so when I go to work, when I teach second grade right now. And next year I'm going to teach fifth grade. Last year I taught sixth grade. Every year I'm just like, God, wherever you want me. He brings some amazingly messed up, traumatized kid into my class. And we get to walk that out. And I do all the other stuff. I teach all the other subjects. But man, it's never work. It's never work because it's so fulfilling. And so I go on Sundays and I fill up so that I can go Monday through Friday and I can pour out all of that. And I'm like, I'm praying over those kids. I pray over their chairs. Sometimes I'm even without saying anything out loud. I walk by and I like give their little shoulder a squeeze and I'm just praying over them as I'm walking through my classroom. So, I mean, if you haven't ever pursued walking in that gift, and if you don't know what it is, go try them.
Yeah.
Maybe
pray
you have
about
no
it.
idea.
I had to ask God in my life, what are my spiritual gifts? And then also I said, God, please grow that in me.
Yeah.
Because, it's one thing to know like, oh, this is my spiritual gift, but, growing that.
Sure.
Like God, like I'm very limited in my amount of like what I can cultivate in myself.
Yeah.
And so that's why, relying on God to help you grow that. So if you're using something that God has given you and you're not asking God to direct it, like it's going to be pretty good, right? But it's never going to be as good as if you fully give it over to God.
Well, it might come easily to you.
Yeah.
But it'll never be at the divine level.
Yes.
That supernatural level where you're like, whoa.
Right.
Like I had this lady come into my classroom. I work in public school. I don't talk about my faith unless I know someone outside of work. I don't talk about my faith to my students. That's totally inappropriate. That's public school. And so I had this woman though, in all the administration there was Muslim. And it was like an intense Muslim space for sure. They stopped school so that they could pray.
Yeah.
They would kick the kids out for recess and put down their rugs. And it was like legit. They were very faith-filled. And so I remember this mom came in and she closed the door behind me and I was subbing at the time. I wasn't even actually a licensed teacher yet. And she said, "Hey, I hear you pray." And I was like, I felt like I was doing some kind of
illegal activity.
I do pray. What? I pray to God. Like I wanted to specify. I pray to God. Just so
Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's like, yeah. She's like, will you pray for me? And I was like, yeah, dude. And we're still friends.
Did you say yeah, dude?
Yeah, dude. Of course I said yeah, dude. That's how I answer everyone for Jesus.
I said, yeah, dude.
I said yeah, dude. Yeah. It was like, so you don't need to be, God was able to use me in that space just because I was willing to say yes and go into that space and use
in
my
that
gift.
moment specifically.
Yeah, it was cool.
The last kind of point that I had was so Matthew 18:20. It's very simple. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them.
Yeah, amen.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're looking for Jesus, this is what you do, right?
Yeah.
And so, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Right? That's all it takes.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot.
However, the more the merrier, right? And so some people will use that to say, well, I don't have to go to church on Sundays, because if I just have a friend or two, we're having church.
Yeah.
But typically, like the people that are asking that question, they're not having church in their house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How many of them are are actually doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the.
Well, it's so good. I was actually just reading about Moses, and so it's nearing the end of his ministry, and he has led the Israelites out of Egypt, which is just insane. If you need some reminder that God controls everything, read through Exodus 1 through 17. And but in Exodus 17, they actually face their first battle, and he calls Joshua, which that becomes its own whole can of worms.
Right.
He calls Joshua and says, "You're going to lead our army." And it was just like that. There's no record of them having, practice army runs or any of this. I don't even know if they had armor. They literally left.
I envision them not having armor, to be honest.
Right.
When I read it,
it doesn't talk about it, right? So God tells Moses, go stand on this hill and hold your staff up.
Right.
And as long as your staff is up in the air, Joshua and his army is going to be winning.
Mhm.
And, so I'm like, okay, I mean, that's weird, but okay, God's weird sometimes. And, so every time when his arms were getting tired though, Aaron and Hur, they were actually standing on either side of him to hold
Holding
his
him up,
arms
yeah.
up. And I just think, God could have handled that a lot of ways. I mean, this is literal life and death.
Yeah.
It's a war. That's an actual war battle. People are
Right.
dying at the foot of this mountain. And he's just standing up there. First of all, I think it's crazy that that's his calling.
Mhm.
His job was to stand there and hold a staff. And it's like, okay.
That's not bad.
Right. I mean, right. When all these people are down here, like,
Well, what about Joshua? Just, all right, sure.
he's like, yeah, I'm on it. I'll go grab
Sounds
some
good.
friends. Yeah.
Grab
Right.
some friends.
And he just says yes, And so then it's Moses' brother and then this other guy. And so they're standing there and their job is to hold his arms. And they situate themselves in such a way so they're just like, it says they're holding him at waist level.
Uh-huh.
So their job really isn't even, it's not huge.
Right.
They're not pushing a rock up a mountain or
Right.
they're not, they're not down there in the battle.
Mhm.
This is what their church needed,
Mhm.
was them to stand there and hold arms.
Right.
And man, if they would have said, I'm just going to catch this one on YouTube, I mean, how differently would that have gone?
I got the kids' game to go to.
Yeah,
so.
right. And like, I mean, it's crazy to me because I'm going to say this wrong. The Amaleks, that they were fighting.
Mhm.
Dude, that nation doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
You don't hear about them after First Chronicles.
Wiped out.
They're like, and that's what God said. He's totally wiped out the entire lineage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ripple effect that these three guys, so Moses holding his stick up in the air,
Mhm.
and then these two holding his arms, and then everyone down there in battle
Right.
saying yes to that. Like, I mean, I know that's not normally the formula of church. They don't even talk about
Well,
brunch.
again, we're privileged.
Right,
That we don't have to,
right.
go to battle to
It's true.
meet Jesus.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
physically anyway.
Right. But I mean, so I don't know. It's wild. That's really all the time we have for that conversation. So thanks for chatting with me, Jacob.
Yeah, anytime.
All right. That's all we have time for today, but I hope you leave with a little something to mull over and are encouraged to chat with God to ask the brave question, am I walking in the light or am I standing in the gray? We hope to see you back at the coffee table for our next episode.